right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and let me get Arlen and me both up on screen for you as well. There's always going to be some issue, Arlen, but there we go. There's Arlen. There's me. Good afternoon, Arlen. How you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. I mean, I'm doing fine most days, except when I start to think about what's going on in the world and the news and politics, then I get all bummed out.
Yeah, you and me both, Arlen. It's been a rough time. And, I kind of snap at you sometimes. I always feel bad. I mean, that's my personality. And I was reading about how Democrats there's all this infighting among Democrats. And I think that infighting is more than welcome as far as I'm concerned, because there are progressives. I think there are people who really do care about the American people. And then there's 99% of the Democratic Party. So I want to see those who care about the American people taking on the other 99%. But you do care about the American people, and you and I sometimes disagree, and I respect your opinion, but I lose it because I see things in a certain way, and I do see the Democrats as fundamentally responsible almost as much or as much as the Republicans. So when folks that I talk to don't have that same perception, it frustrates me, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I think everybody's all messed up right now. Both parties, the American people, nobody really knows, what to do next. And, what's going on now is bad enough. And, I think, not only are the Democrats divided, I think the Republicans are starting to get more divided as they, talk about whether they want to approve that Senate package of, tax cuts, the big, beautiful bill and all that. There's some division there, and Elon Musk is sort of moving away from Trump's point of view. So it's all interesting and, pretty chaotic right now.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. Before we talk about Gaza, just to follow up on what you just said, there seems to be different wings in the Republican Party. There's more the sort of conservative or right-wing populists represented by Steve Bannon, who is really against the tech bros and against the kind of loosening up of any, or the elimination of any regulations whatsoever in big tech. Then you have the Elon Musk, maybe that's the tech side of it. And Trump doesn't seem to necessarily agree with either one. He kind of does his own thing when based on, I guess, inclination or, I don't know, some kind of vibe shift he feels. I don't really know. So you're right. There's not a monolithic position in either party.
And you're absolutely right. Donald Trump is hard to figure out. I mean, he'll say one thing, he'll do something else, he'll change it a dime. I mean, he's very unpredictable, and his mind is very chaotic, I think.
Well, nevertheless, he did defeat the Democrat with relative ease, although, again, we're such a divided country, it wasn't by a huge margin. But at least in the Electoral College, he won handily, and I think that's something Democrats have yet to reckon with, yet to really acknowledge. We'll, acknowledge causes. We'll discuss that in today's program, which is actually called "Can We Defeat the Republicrats?" And there's a picture there of Kshama Sawant. She's running for Congress against Adam Smith, a very, very war hawkish Democrat. But we always start, Arlen, or at least I usually start, unfortunately, with the tragedy. And I say unfortunately because it's unfortunate that this is where, as bad as things may be for many Americans, I think it's clearly worse in Palestine, in Gaza. And the carnage, it just doesn't end. 54,510 is the official number. 40 more Palestinians killed yesterday, and we don't give any, we don't give any slack to Trump, even though he wasn't president when it began. But he has failed signally to prevent the carnage from continuing, and his number, the number of dead while he's been president, at Israel's hands, at the U.S. hands, over 4,200, 4,241. So just terrible, Arlen. I just wanted to also just highlight one story. I don't always give specifics about Gaza, Israel, but this is so horrific. Even the New York Times is covering it. Israeli soldiers open fire near Gaza aid site. So Israel's been luring starving Gazans to just a handful of food distribution centers. This is according to the New York Times in the past week or so. The UN has said, no, we don't like this policy. We want to distribute the aid. We think the United Nations should be distributing the aid. I agree with the UN. Instead, Israel and the US, Trump, have backed their plan, which is that independent contractors, presumably, I'm guessing, friends of financial helpers to Trump and Netanyahu, are getting paid a lot of our money to distribute a little bit of food to starving Gazans. And when they come to these centers, they have been getting shot at by Israel and killed.
Yeah, it's a real mess because nobody really knows, what to do. I think, for Israel, Netanyahu's in charge. He's doing whatever he wants to. He seems to want to let this war continue on and on for various reasons. And the United States doesn't know, how to confront Netanyahu about any of this. And, Hamas is certainly not a sympathetic, their point of view is not sympathetic. So it's a mess right now without answers, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, I got to push back a little bit. Why is Hamas even relevant to this conversation? It's Israel that's killing civilians. It's not that they're killing. It's not like you have two armies in the field, like when the Germans and the U.S. fought during World War II and the West fought and Russia fought. I mean, you had German armies. You had American, Russian, British armies all killing each other. That was the German armies were under the command of a Nazi. But that's not who's doing the killing. That's not who's getting the people getting killed are just ordinary everyday Gazans.
Yeah,
in extraordinarily high numbers.
I think the problem is Hamas has been in power there. They've been leading the Palestinians for so many years now. And, unless they step aside, there's not going to be likely any chance for a good settlement. So, they don't seem to be willing to, make changes. They're kind of happy the way things are because they don't want to give up. So, and then,
my understanding is they have repeatedly offered to end, to even cede power. Just stop killing us, stop killing our people, and we'll leave. And Israel continues to kill. Well, and I don't really understand. None of that makes sense to me. The Israeli army occupies all of Gaza. They've turned the entire region into rubble. How is that in any way the fault of Hamas?
Well, Hamas is leading, the people of Gaza, and, they've been doing that for so long, and they've never done anything but, kill and stop. They don't seem to be interested in having a peace process that I know of.
What peace? Israel's just destroying the region. They've razed it to the ground. Hamas isn't doing anything. Hamas isn't even in Israel right now. There's no one from Hamas in Israel, and Hamas has virtually no say. I mean, Israel could either kill or not kill. They could either stop occupying the region or they could keep occupying it and keep shooting children in the head and in the chest. I don't understand. Honestly, I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't get your point. I really don't.
My point is that Hamas is not helping anything. They're, if they stepped aside, then there might be a chance for a peace settlement. But I agree with you. Of course, it's Israel, it's Netanyahu, it's the Israeli soldiers that are the major villains right now. They're the ones that are killing so many Palestinians, so many people in Gaza, and that can't be excused. But I don't see any help coming from Hamas. So if they would step down, maybe there'd be a chance. But they're not going to. They want to stay in power.
Well, here's a headline from NBC News. Dateline. I don't know what this is. I believe February of. Let me make sure. I think it was February of 25, February 27, 25. And the headline here is Hamas ready to cede control of Gaza, official says. So right there, Hamas is saying, we'll give it up. Just stop killing our people.
Well, when they
and
actually
even if,
do it, Al, then that'll be significant. But right
well,
now,
if, Arlen, what are they supposed to do? They're all being killed. They said, we'll give it up. We're ready today, if not yesterday, to step aside from governance. Israel repeatedly lies and says, oh, they're not giving it. They're fighting back. They're killing. They're using human shields. It's Israel that's doing all of that. Israel's committing a genocide. I'm just totally, this idea that somehow Hamas bears some of the blame. I just don't, maybe you could say, well, they shouldn't have, October 7 was a crime. Okay. But so what? So they committed a crime. So you try to capture those responsible. That doesn't mean you kill everybody who lives in the area and turn it into complete rubble.
I don't think there's anything positive or good about Hamas. They've never done anything that helps peace, that helps their people. They've been they've been in charge, and you say, well, they want to give it up, but that's just saying it is not the same as actually doing it.
Well, why should the Hamas be the ones to cede power? There's far more blood on, and they've already said they would. There's so much more blood on Netanyahu's hands. He's the war criminal. Why doesn't he give up power?
I'm with you on that, Hal. I don't disagree. I'm just saying there's nothing really good to say about Hamas.
I just think that's I don't think that's relevant. I don't see how that's in any way relevant. The fact that regardless of how good or bad Hamas is, that has zero relevance with respect to what Israel's doing. Israel is totally guilty. Israel is monstrous. Israel is Nazis. There's nothing you can say that Hamas has done that in any way justifies what Israel's doing or makes it okay. So I don't see why we're talking about Hamas.
Well, we both agree about Israel, that they're doing, they're war criminals right now, and they need to stop what they're doing. And we both agree on that. But the process of peace is still kind of far away until we can figure out a way to get it.
Well, the way you get it is you tell Israel that they can't have another bomb, they can't have another gun, they can't have another missile. And if they don't stop killing Gazans immediately, then we're going to send the U.S. military in, which is what we should have done a year and a half ago. And we're going to put the U.S. Army between Israel and Gaza. And if Israeli soldiers start trying to come in, we're going to mow them down. That's how you stop it. And if we did that, there'd be no more killing.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I think any kind of peace process that works, that gets the killing to stop. It's a good thing, but we're not there yet.
I got even just bringing up Hamas when Israel is luring starving people. It's starving. It is starving them. Israel is luring starving people into these very tiny number of sometimes distribution centers and then is shooting them. I don't see how that's Hamas. I don't see how Hamas is relevant to that.
Well, I'm going to agree with you totally about everything you say. And I'm no fan of Israel. Obviously, they are the ones most responsible right now for the killing, and the United States for supporting them through, the Biden administration, the Trump administration. They just let them do whatever they want to do. And what they want to do, at least Netanyahu and his people, they want to kill as many people as they can. And nobody's talking about a two-state solution, which has always been the traditional plan, and it's not happening. And Netanyahu doesn't want that to happen, the two-state solution. He's been, actually doing the opposite. So, there's no real solution at the moment, and Israel does need to stop. I agree.
Arlen Grossman with us. It is Halitics. I got a little. This is a topic I just can't keep myself from getting a little burn up maybe is the right word, not burn up. But yeah, it's just so painful to read about this. Let's move to a different story here, Arlen. More kids dying. We know they're dying in Israel, in Gaza. They're not dying in Israel. They're dying in Gaza as a result of Israel. Really, Secretary Rubio, I'm lying about the kids dying under Trump. Tell me, Arlen, tell us why you wanted to talk about this story.
Well, as you know, I respect Nicholas Kristof. I think he's a great writer. He's a person with a lot of integrity, and when he follows these things very closely. He follows things that others won't, and he's noticing that all the Doge cuts from Elon Musk, of all these health agencies and all these emergency services are being, destroyed, decimated. And as a result, many people are dying, because of medical conditions that they used to be able to have help for, but now they don't anymore. And so there's, he is Kristof has found lots of evidence of children dying, of lots of people dying. And Marco Rubio went before Congress and said, oh, no, nobody's dying on my watch. He's totally denying all the damage that's been done, all the people that have died, all the people that are dying. And in other words, Rubio has no integrity. He's with Trump and all the MAGAs right now, and he's not going to go against Trump.
Yeah, it's really upsetting, and this is a powerful piece by Kristof, no question. Thanks for sharing, Arlen. We have seen that those cuts to U.S. aid have led directly to deaths, and he points to a couple of kids who died, who had serious diseases but were life-threatening, but were stable because they were getting very inexpensive medications, which have been cut off.
Kristof is talking not just about a few people. He's talking about hundreds, thousands of people who are dying just because of these cuts that Doge has done to the government. And people are dying, people are hurting, and the United States is just not doing anything about it.
Well, there's Evan Anzu is one that he identifies, Kristof, and he does say there's, a very large number. He doesn't have the exact number, but very high number, and he identifies several. And it is, there's nothing to say. It's terrible. It's just an awful thing. And Kristof took this picture of, I guess he was in South Sudan, so I give him a lot of credit for going there. And he took this picture of this little boy, who obviously looks pretty malnourished there, but surviving, not totally skin and bones, but surviving when that picture was taken because of the retroviral cocktail that he was getting for, I think he says 12 cents a day, some very, very inexpensive amount. And even that was too much for the Trump administration to pay.
You know what it all comes down to, Hal, in my opinion? I think Trump, I think Elon Musk, all those people don't really care about people. They're more concerned about profits. They're more concerned about numbers. They don't really have any compassion at all, as opposed to Nicholas Kristof, who does. I mean, he goes around the world and he tries to, point out where there's people that are hurting and dying, and the results of our policies. So I think that's the big difference. The MAGA, the Trump people don't care about how people are doing, and the result is that people are hurting and dying.
Yep, that's right. Without those medications, Kristof points out that little boy died. So it's another, it's just a tragedy. It's another life lost. And I agree with when Kristof says, that every life is precious. I totally agree with that. That was the message of the Pope as well, Leo. I think we've seen, now to make it more sort of contentious or political, I think we've seen this from both parties, is that there's really a very situational ethics. Sometimes lives matter. If you can make them, for political, you can get a benefit politically to talk about certain lives, then you're going to talk about them. If other lives aren't going to help you politically, if they're lost, you don't talk about them. And I guess my question is, what do we do about this, Arlen? What do we do about this
That's the question.
amoral or immoral world we live in that's as wicked as it's ever been?
We certainly can identify the problems. People are hurting, people are dying, people are suffering. And what do we do about it is, the question of the hour. Unfortunately, in our system, you have the Republicans who are totally controlled by Donald Trump and are, totally believe everything he says and are willing to follow him no matter what he says or does. And you got the Democratic Party who lost very, badly, and they should be making some major changes in, how they do things, but they don't seem to have figured out how to do it yet. They're kind of afraid. And right now, the old guard is still in power. The Chuck Schumers, the Hakeem Jeffries, they're still in charge of the Democratic Party, and there's been no real big changes coming from there. So, and also you have the division in the Democratic Party between progressives like AOC and Sanders, and you've got the moderates, pro-corporatist Democrats. So, they have to fight it out and see who comes ahead out of that.
All right. Again, Halitics is the program. We're talking to Arlen. The bigpicturereport.com is where he blogs. He is California's thought leader. And there's another child who died because direct result of the cuts to U.S. aid. Her name, Akchol Dong, 8 years old. She also needed those retroviral medications, very inexpensive and easily distributed, but the small amount, the pittance required to keep her alive was withdrawn. So,
and she's one of just many other victims. And we could focus on one person, and it makes it more human. But at the same time, this is going on and on for lots and lots of people, and nobody seems to be, have the answer yet.
All right, so this is from Christoph. I know you're a fan of Christoph, and there's much he does I admire. There's no question. But I have a problem with him because I think he's too deferential to power. I think he's too willing to see good in powerful people who do bad things. And I think a perfect example of this, I think by his doing that means we're more likely to have bad outcomes because he's not willing to demand complete house cleaning where we get rid of the bad apples that are destroying the barrel. So he writes, I see Secretary of State Marco Rubio as a good man doing bad things. And he says, but perhaps he thinks even worse of me. Well, that's not really thinking bad about him. I mean, it seems like he's praising Rubio. That's how I read that. Why would you say that? What's the reason to call Rubio a good man?
I think Christoph is trying to be as nice as he possibly can. I think he is a nice person. He wants to keep the friends he has in Washington. Maybe he doesn't want to alienate Rubio so he can't go back to him and talk to him. I don't know. But, generally Christoph is not going to be the one that's going to be, calling for a major revolution. He's just pointing out all the terrible things that are happening under the current administration, and it needs to be pointed out.
I agree with that assessment. I do. And I think also Christoph is a pretty good person inside. I think he really wants the best for people, and he has trouble, unlike me, seeing the worst in others. But isn't it time for revolution? Don't we actually really need to have columnists in the New York Times who are prepared to say this system is just broken? This is just too horrific what's happening. And Christoph does his annual column where he says things are getting better. It's a good time to be alive. Don't we really need something very, very different? Isn't it time for a real change?
Yes, you are right. It is time for real change. We just have to figure out where it's coming from, who's going to, be in charge of it, and how we get it done. That's, that hasn't been figured out yet.
Well, here's what. Yeah, I just don't think Rubio's even trying to figure that out, though. Not Rubio. I mean, Christoph. I don't know that he is, or anyone in the New York Times is trying to figure that out. I think their solution is to elect Democrats.
Well, they're not. The New York Times is not a far left newspaper, even though Trump would and his people would like to think it is. They're basically they're liberal. They're moderately liberal, and they want to support the Democratic Party. But if you want something a little more extreme, you're going to have to go to other sources, I guess, who don't have the clout that the New York Times does, but are still, there's people out there who are coming up with ideas and the kind of things that you're talking about, but you have to seek them out, And
well, they're on, like me, on YouTube, and we're going to learn pretty soon that YouTube is apparently the most trusted news source. I honestly believe that statements like what Christoph gave, and by the way, I put on here because he adds, Rubio chooses not to make the argument that I believe is Trump's true position, not just Trump's, Rubio's position too. Rubio, the man that Christoph calls a good man, he has the same position. He wants tax cuts that disproportionately benefit the rich, and is perfectly happy to cut funds in the budget from people who are so marginalized that they can't complain. I don't believe that's a good person. I don't think people who do that are good people. Right. But I would argue that because Christoph says things like he's a good person, that's why a lot of people don't trust the New York Times.
Well, compared to many of the others that are in the Trump administration, Rubio is relatively moderate, but he's still not good. No question about that. And, there's just nobody in the Trump administration that has any decency or any morals. I mean, Trump's in charge of everything, and everybody defers to him, and everybody's afraid of him. And the other side, the Democratic Party, doesn't know how to stop the Republicans, because our system is such that the next time we have a chance to vote will be next November. So that's over a year and a half away. So, or about a year and a half away. So, our system has kind of, held us back, and nobody's come up with an answer yet. I hope that they can.
Arlen Grossman with us on Halitics. Don't forget, join Halitics on Facebook. This is another very interesting news story, Arlen, you recommended, from Philip Bump. He's another kind of a center-left Democrat, like Christoph, I'd say, who writes for the Washington Post. And this tracks what we were just talking about with Christoph. Americans don't trust these news sources, but they keep using them. And why did this jump out at you? What's your reaction to this piece before I get a few clips from it?
Well, I'm very concerned about where people get their news, where people get their ideas from. And right now, I think you've got quite a lot of companies and, the Fox Newses of the world and their clones that are, doing everything they can to say that, Biden's responsible for all the bad things that are happening in the world. And, so Trump parrots that. But, they, I don't know that there is any. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is the news sources that we have available to us are not good. And, we're not getting, any good news that's going to help us figure out what's going on in this country.
Well, this is what Bump writes, which is very consistent with what you just said. So let's just put this up there. I think this is, you may want to add to this, or maybe this just bolsters what your view is, Arlen. But what Bump says is, and what Americans see as their most trusted, by the way, the only news sources I think that were, for all Americans, over 50% were the Weather Channel, maybe YouTube, right? And the thing about the Weather Channel, I mean, the weather, whatever, I mean, that's not really a partisan issue generally. And I don't think they do a lot of articles about climate change. If they did, I would find the Weather Channel more credible, but obviously deniers wouldn't. But the thing about YouTube is that you pick and choose the videos you watch. You pick and choose your source. So if you like my position, you watch me, and then you're going to be like, well, I trust Hal, so therefore I find YouTube reliable. But if you watched, I don't know, some, that Brian Taylor Greene, who's, basically a Democratic operative, you wouldn't, and you have the same views as me, you wouldn't find it reliable. So it's not really helpful in that regard because it doesn't present a unified viewpoint throughout YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube doesn't really have a point of view. They could be, like you say, either far right, far left. It's whatever people choose to put on there. So they're not a good source. And, in the old days, when I was much younger, we had some good sources of news that most people agreed with, and there was somewhat of a consensus. When you had people like Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley and all those people, there was some people had an idea that we were all on the same page. Now it seems like we're totally on opposite pages on so many issues, and it's just getting worse, the division, these news sources, these media companies are not helping. And of course, you've got the problem that it's the rich people it's the corporations that own the media. And so you're only going to get so much in the way of points of view that, in other words, you're not going to get everything that you'd like to see from, these sources.
Well, you get more for sure on YouTube. That is true. There's more extreme views and there's more I don't want to say extreme. There's more anti-establishment views for sure. By the way, the YouTuber I was thinking of is Brian Tyler Cohen. I said Brian Taylor Green. I was confusing Brian Tyler Cohen with Brian Austin Green, who was an actor who was on Beverly Hills 90210, among other programs. So there's Brian Tyler Cohen. He's called an independent, but he's really a Democratic operative for sure.
I was just saying that there's Marjorie Taylor Greene too. There's a lot of
that's true. There's more. I forgot. That's right. I should have thrown her in there too. Brian Taylor Greene, Marjorie Taylor. Yeah. She's not. She's outside the mainstream, Arlen. You don't have to worry about NYT consulting her. Why do people believe extremist rhetoric on media? What's that about? And here's an answer. This is something I've talked about a little bit before, but I just wanted to share this with you, Arlen. And this is an answer that will not be, this is an answer to what we should do about it. Unfortunately, it won't happen. How does economic inequality shape conspiracy theories? So basically, the more unequal a society is, the more that wealth and power are concentrated in just a few hands, the less people trust the media.
Yeah, well, we know that, and lots of people know that, but if you're not going to find it, talked about very much in our mass media, which again, like I say, are controlled by corporations who have the most money and are taking advantage of all this wealth inequality. So, it's just something that nobody's really working on or trying to, get control of or figure out what to do, except, well, maybe AOC and Bernie sometimes talk about it, but beyond them, very few.
Well, you mentioned, Arlen, I think it's really important to think about this. You mentioned how back, in the 60s and 70s, there was a little bit more unanimity, a little bit more, I guess, consensus on trustworthy news sites. And I think a big reason for that is there was far less inequality in the 60s and 70s. If you recall, that was a period of time when we had just experienced the Great Society. The welfare state was actually had drawn a pretty tight net under most Americans. Wages were much higher for working people, and tax rates were much higher on wealthy people. So it's easier for people to kind of agree on things when they have relatively often the same or similar interests. Now that isn't the case.
And there was a great deal of people who were considered middle class. It seems like, the major portion of the majority of the country were, either middle class or close to middle class. Now you have just extremes. You have super wealthy people and you have lots and lots of people who have no money, who are in poverty or homeless. So yeah, it's a different world now than it was back then.
And given that reality, why would we expect the Democrats to champion poor, struggling, and working people, when after all, those people don't have a lot of money or virtually none to give them. They have no real ability to influence media or influence the way stories are covered. Isn't it time? Doesn't this augur or suggest we really do need to go in a different direction? And you kind of got there last week. We were talking about this. You kind of showed some inclination towards the Green Party and all independent candidates are on.
Yeah, no, I agree with so much of what you say, Hal, and I'd like to see, probably the same people that you like in charge. But the problem is, it's just too far away. It's not going to happen. It's pretty impossible the way our system is set up right now. So, we have to figure out a way to, overcome, all these things that are going on now, where people are more interested in power and control, and putting down the other side, and start getting into a position where people are working together toward, the goal of making this a good and fair country. And unfortunately, the Trump administration is not helping that.
Well, here's what Bump, in a different column they references in the article you recommended, writes, as Dems choose a path forward, remember the real problem. And I didn't know what the real problem was. He says, remember the real problem. I looked through this article. I looked pretty closely. He never really says this is the real problem. I think the real problem, though, as far as I can tell, he's suggesting is the decisions as to who takes power is kind of out of everybody's hands. There's these impersonal forces, the economy, the cycles of the stock market that really no one can control, foreign policy or foreign events that no one can control. I think that's what he's saying is the real problem. And you shouldn't get all worried about what happened today because tomorrow can be totally different. I think that's what he's suggesting.
Well, he's not coming up with the one true answer, and nobody's coming up with the one true answer until people, come together and, like I say, decide, hey, this is not working. What we're doing now is not working. Let's figure out a new way to get people together. And so far, there's been no groundswell for that kind of view. So people are kind of stuck in their own points of view and don't want to change. And I guess the only way really out of it is if there's an election and there's a party or a person that doesn't believe in what's going on right now, but has some solutions that would help the most people. Well, that'd be wonderful. But of course, our political system is not set up to make that easy. I don't have the answers, Hal. I don't think anybody has the answers right now, but we know that we're in bad shape.
All right, here's what Matthew Iglesias says. This is from the Bump article, Arlen. And I listened closely to everything you said, like in terms of who has answers. I can tell people what I think they should do, and I do that, and they don't do it. So I clearly don't have the answer either. But he does cite, Bump does, the Washington Post resident sort of leaning Democrat columnist. He writes, this past weekend, writer Matt Iglesias, who, by the way, is a multi-millionaire, he may be worth over 100. He had a lot of stock in this enterprise that did very well for a while and then kind of went sideways. That his partner started, who's the writer of the guy who wrote Abundance. Now I can't remember his name. He writes for the New York Times. Anyway, Evan, was it Klein? Yeah, Klein. I don't know. I'll look it up. Klein? Say again.
No. Ezra Klein, you're not
Ezra Klein. Ezra, yeah.
Okay.
He and Iglesias together started a website that was and kind of built a media empire that was worth a lot of money at one point. I don't think it's worth very much now. Anyway, what Iglesias writes that, and he says that he criticized a plan reported by the New York Times that would focus on building media voices to reach out to young men. Well, I agree with Iglesias. That was just contrived. It was like, let's see what we're going to poll test, and we're going to do, focus group test different voices and see who can persuade people. So that's obviously absurd. But then Iglesias does say this is what people should do, what the Democrats should do: study public opinion accurately and adopt views, especially on social and moral issues that align with public opinion. So what do you think about that idea?
Well, I think this is a very good time for the Democrats to really sit down and think about what, how badly they were beaten and, how unsuccessful they've been for a long time, and come up with a new plan. And, it's going to take people button heads and coming up, sitting around and coming up with ideas. Personally, I would like to see AOC and Bernie, their kind of views in control, but it's not going to happen. People are not ready for those kind of progressive people. But
when you say people, who do you mean by people? Do you mean like the leadership of the party, the Obamas, the Pelosi's? Because I agree with you. They're certainly not, it's not that they're not ready for it. They just don't want policies that will reduce their privilege and influence. But do you think the American voters, in terms of the specific policies, do you think they're not ready for a much more progressive economic message?
I'm not sure if they are or not, because if there is a progressive message, the other side is going to tear it down and say they're communists and all kinds of things like that. I think the American people are ready for answers. They just don't know where to look for the answers, and nobody is out there that's going to help them now. But I think now is the time for the Democratic Party, which is the only real alternative we have to Donald Trump and the MAGA people. So, they can do something, and we could vote for them if they come up with, the ideas that we'd like them to come up with. But how are they going to do it? I don't know. I
don't really see them as an alternative, though. I think they're basically the same party. They fight. They seem to fight over those very issues that Iglesias wants the party to concentrate on, right? And let me see if I can get that up on the screen a little clearer. The social issues and the moral values they might fight over. Should there be trans girls competing in California sporting events? They may disagree on that, but they don't disagree on, for example, Medicare for all. Both parties agree that healthcare is not a human right, that you don't have a right to healthcare. Both parties pretty much agree that working people don't deserve a living wage. So at least on the issues the day-to-day life issues, the parties seem to have very similar views. It's only on those social and moral values issues, abortion, where there's some disagreement.
I think the moral and social issues are just distractions, really. And you're right. The actual, the things that really matter are economic at this point. Right now we have, the wide inequality has to be taken. We have to do something about that. The fact that so many people seems like the majority of the country is like a paycheck away from losing everything. And, the fact we don't have health insurance in this country, there are just so many things wrong. And, but the American people, unfortunately, can't figure out, what the true answer is, because they're getting it from all sides. You're getting the right.
Well, that's why, again, I think it's our job to do everything we can, and especially institutional left, to push people away from the Democratic Party. And I hope that people start to heed that message. This is bumped, though, agreeing with you, at least when it comes to AOC and Bernie. What Democrats are and should be looking for is people who can present their arguments with authenticity. And he does actually bring up AOC. She's unapologetic and passionate. But what he doesn't say is what the argument should be that will sway people. And I think that's the real problem. I don't think we have to come up. I think we all know the arguments that will sway people. Bernie came out of nowhere, a very little known senator from Vermont in 2016, barely lost. It took the combined might of the entire party to take him down against Hillary Clinton, and he barely lost to her. And he would have beaten Trump, too, if he had been the nominee in that election. So I think we know what messages work. It's just they're messages that are not acceptable to the elites in either party.
Yeah, you're right. I think right now you've got AOC and Bernie going across the country. At least they were going across the country and pointing out, how about the inequality, about the unfairness of our system. And the people that go to see them are very excited and very passionate. But whether you can get, everybody to come along with them, or most Democrats to come, to agree with them is tough, because you've got a lot of competing forces that like things the way they are. Let's face it. So the people who are on top are not going to easily give up, their privileges, their tax breaks, and so.
I don't think AOC, honestly, I don't think she's the right choice, because I don't think she seems to be authentic. I understand she's perceived to be authentic, or at least she's feared on the right and in the center as someone who's authentic, but I don't think the American public are going to view her that way. She's very much associated with identity politics, and she also is a loyal Democrat, and that is going to make her very much disliked by tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, including myself.
Well, I understand your point of view about her, but as far as I can tell, I think she really believes what she says, and she really has good ideas. But there's going to be people that are always going to attack her because she's a woman, she's of color, she's different. But I think she sincerely wants to do good and change the country for the better. And I wish she was running for president, but I know it won't be easy for her.
Well, she is going to run. I mean, I would probably, if there's a Democrat I would vote for, it probably is she, maybe Ilhan Omar, but I want to play this clip because, and I played this clip before, and this is where we have a disagreement. But to me, this clip almost renders her unacceptable as for president. But let me play it for you.
She understands the urgency of rent checks and groceries and prescriptions. She is as committed to our reproductive and civil rights as she is to taking on corporate greed.
So we know that she, meaning Kamala Harris, has zero commitment to taking on corporate greed. So when AOC said that, she's basically telling you she has little or no commitment to protecting reproductive rights either, although that wasn't her message. But that, to me, isn't the worst part of this speech. There's just a little bit more to this that we're going to play this little more of this clip.
She is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing hostages home.
All right, well, we now know that was a lie. That just, I mean, maybe, just maybe she believed it. But we know that it was false. That was a false statement. There is no possibility that Kamala Harris was working for a ceasefire, and this has been roundly debunked. There were statements. The former president or former ambassador, Michael Herzog, flat out said, nobody in the administration ever came to us and said ceasefire now. Not one time. Well, they never did.
I really think you're being unfair to AOC. What she's doing is she, at those moments that you're playing what she's saying, she's trying to stop Trump from being elected, and the only person that can stop Trump from being elected would be the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris. So that's who she's going to push in the because her goal is to defeat Donald Trump. Well, it didn't happen, and Kamala Harris is gone, and I hope AOC will continue to, talk about the things that she thinks are important. And I think the things she thinks are important are progressive issues. And I don't see any reason for, not to respect her. She's a politician. She has to do certain things. She has to say certain things. But I think when it comes right down to it, I'd like to see her as president.
But Arlen, why? I mean, she went on stage and she lied to the American people. Doesn't that greatly impact on her credibility? Doesn't that? I mean, you're always criticizing. I totally agree with you. Rightly so. Criticizing Republicans for lying, for telling half-truths, misleading. Rubio, we just spent a segment about how he lied when he said that the cuts to U.S. aid didn't kill anybody, when in fact they did. So how is AOC exempt from that same criticism? Just because, in your opinion, her motive, her goal, which was to defeat Trump, is justified, makes it okay. The end there justifies the means. Is that it?
I think so. It's, you and I, Hal, if we want to talk about anything we want, we could say anything we want. And there's not going to be any important blowback. I mean, nobody's going to come and take us away or, based on just the things that we say. Well, at least I hope they won't. But AOC, like it or not, is a politician. She's a part of the Democratic Party. She knows that the only way that she's going to be able to get the things done that she wants done is if other people in the Democratic Party will support her. So she's careful.
But they didn't support her. They didn't even vote for her to be the ranking Democrat in a party in the House Oversight Committee. Instead, they voted for a dead man. I mean, literally dead. He's dead now. Jerry Connolly's dead. They voted for him over her.
Well, not much she could do about it. She could only say what she believes, and she's going to say a few things that'll not alienate her from other Democrats. Because if she was too extreme and alienated herself, she'd be out of there, and no one would even consider her.
I don't know that I agree with that, Arlen. But maybe she would get more popular. But what if she had gone on stage and said, "You know what? Here's a speech that was vetted." That the DNC told, they read it. They wanted me to submit every word. They wanted approval. That's, the billionaires that Kamala agreed to, be the minders, to be our minders. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk straight to you. We have two really bad options for president. I personally think Kamala Harris isn't quite as bad an option, but she's pretty damn bad. But that just tells you how bad Trump is. The bottom line, though, is we need to move in a very, very different direction. We have an administration that's complicit in genocide. We have an administration that's consistently betrayed workers. And the only reason I'm supporting them is because they're not quite as bad as Trump. If she had said that, she would have gotten wild support from all over the country. She would have been viewed as authentic, as someone who was speaking her mind. Right now, nobody trusts her. The elites don't trust her because they suspect that she's really not on board their neoliberal agenda. Well, she said she isn't, but at the same time, she's bent over backwards to placate them. And people on the left, genuine progressives like myself, think of her as just a dishonest and a shill. So, I mean, wouldn't she be better off telling the truth? And if she lost, so what? So she loses. So she tries to build power outside the Congress. But being inside the Democratic Party, you have no influence. She can't change anything. She has no power in the party.
I disagree with you if she said, this is what the Democrats want me to say, but I'm not going to say it, and this is what I really believe. I don't know if she'd still be popular. I think, she'll get attacked from every side because that's just, people are going to be pushing back at her because they don't, they want their own interests to be on top. And, she's, I think, in a difficult position of being in Congress and not being able to say everything that she would like to say. But I think she's saying 95% of what she thinks and would like to say. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a lot more than most Democrats or anybody else.
All right, let's go to yet another clip. Well, I'll let you choose. Do you want to hear Kshama Sawant, the independent socialist running for Congress against Democratic incumbent Adam Smith in Seattle? Or do you want to hear from Medea Benjamin and Greta Thunberg from the flotilla? And that's going to be criticizing the Republican Lindsey Graham. Well, I'll give you a third one, Arlen, because you brought this up. Joni Ernst going after telling us we're all going to die. I guess that's the one you want.
The Sawant I've never heard of before. Ernst, I know what she's all about, but the middle one you said I might be more interested in.
All right. Well, here's the headline. We won't go to this. This is Joni Ernst. She is the senator. She's a pig killer. She's a pig farmer in Iowa, and she was at a town hall. She was getting roundly criticized by her constituents for the Trump cuts, the Doge cuts to Medicaid, and it was pointed out to her that people will die as a result, and her answer was, well, we're all going to die. That did not sit well with the crowd, as it should not have, and there is going to be a Democratic challenger, Representative J.D. Scholten. I know nothing about J.D. Scholten. I don't like the Democratic Party. I actually registered today, Arlen, as a Green. But if I was in Iowa, I would almost certainly vote for J.D. Scholten because she's hard. This woman is just really she's crazy and dangerous and bad.
Well, so many of those Republicans are, and I'm really happy to see that when they go back home, that they are often being attacked and criticized, from the general public because of all the terrible things that are going on in Washington. So, I could see, she's bad, and there's a lot of them bad. So what we want to do is find some people that people want to vote for. And I don't think they're going to come from the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is totally under Trump's thumb. The Democratic Party is the only party that has any real possibilities of beating the Trump people.
Well, let me just say the criticism of Ernst, totally justified, and it's based on economics, right? Cuts to Medicaid, cuts to essential health care. It's not about some sort of cultural issue. It's not about, I don't know, we talked about a few of them, abortion. It's not about, which is, still contentious. It's not about guns. People are up in arms because she is supporting cuts to an essential government program that prevents people from dying for lack of health care. This is such a perfect example of an issue the Democrats should be focusing on. It's not that we're not going to cut Medicaid. It's not that we're not going to cut Medicare. We're going to expand them. We're going to make sure every American has health care. That's the winning message, except that, the billionaire owners of healthcare companies won't like it.
Well, we've been saying that for decades, and it just doesn't happen because there's too many, powerful influences that put the thumb on those kind of things like universal health care, and they're not going to allow it to happen. And right now what's going on is Trump is, putting us way into high stratospheres of debt, national debt. I think people can see that. And at the same time, cutting programs that we have that really help people, and, those kind of things that Joni Ernst got yelled at for, that's what they're doing. So,
yep. It's true. You're absolutely right, Arlen. All right, let's go here's the clip. I mentioned Code Pink. Here's Medea. I work with her. She is a great voice for peace.
When international institutions, our government, and the international community... Let
me just stop for a sec. That's Greta Thunberg. She's best known as a climate activist from Sweden. As a teenager, she staged a sit-in, I believe, at her school to demand action to stop the emissions of fossil fuels. She has most lately made news as part of a flotilla to provide aid to the people of Gaza. They're on a completely a peace ship. It's a peace ship. There's no weapons on it, no arms, nothing. And they've already been attacked at least once. I think Israel either tried to swamp them or did something. They haven't yet sunk the ship, but they have attacked the ship. Here's Greta Thunberg. She's got her watermelon. Watermelon, of course, a symbol of Palestine because it's green, red, and black with the black seeds, the red meat inside, and the green rind. Here she is.
Fails to uphold any human decency and leaves us with nothing but impunity for those responsible for ecocide and genocide, then it falls on us to be the adults in the room.
Did you see the disgusting tweet that Senator Lindsey Graham put out?
All right, let me see. So that's the tweet. I can't read it. It says, happy... I'm going to blow that up
Greta
if I possibly...
and her friends can swim. They hope Greta and her friends can swim.
So he's calling for them to be sunk. That's just really disgusting. There's the tweet. Let's play. That's from Lindsey Graham. more from Medea.
It was a picture of the Madeleine, the boat that's trying to get to Gaza with food and medicines. And he said, I hope Greta and her friends can swim. He was referring to Greta Thunberg, who was on the boat with 9 other courageous, unarmed humanitarians. So Lindsey Graham is basically saying that he hopes Israel will do what it has done in the past, which is attack ships that are trying to help the besieged population of Gaza. Lindsey Graham, let's not forget, is somebody who has taken over $1 million from the pro-Israel lobby. Lindsey Graham is a twisted and sick man whose legacy will be supporting mass slaughter and starvation. Greta Thunberg and her friends are heroes, and the whole world knows it. Shame on you, Senator Graham.
All right, so I see you smiling, Arlen. I assume you approve of that message by Medea?
Of course. I mean, Lindsey Graham is just, he's a horrible person. I don't know why they keep electing him, but they do. He's probably got more money than he knows what to do with. But, he was actually almost a decent person when John McCain was in the Senate. And John McCain kind of kept him somewhere near the middle. But once John McCain died, I think Lindsey just went far right, and he's been stuck there for a long time. Although there's actually one good thing that he did. I heard this morning Senator Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham have a bill that they're trying to pass that would help Ukraine, and that would be useful for getting more weapons to Ukraine. So on that part, I agree with him a little bit, but on 99% of the time, he's terrible.
Well, you heard really plain spokenness from Medea, and this is what Democrats say they need. I agree. But that message is not one, again, that you're going to hear from mainstream Democrats, that we need to support Israel, we cannot support Israel. We must support Israel's victims. And again, this is a message that I think even for those who might be on the fence, not diehard Zionists, not diehard Israel supporters, but people in the middle, they would say, well, at least they're taking a stand. At least they're fighting for something. We haven't heard anything even like we talk about AOC. She's never been that plain spoken as we just heard from Medea. So isn't that part of the problem with the Democratic Party? They won't speak truth, their truth to power, the way, whether you like it or not, and I don't like it, but Joni Ernst was telling her truth. Well, we're all going to die. Sucks to be you. If you don't have health care, that's too bad. We can all say this is awful, and it is, but she spoke her truth. We don't hear Democrats ever speaking their truth.
I think, Hal, if I went back and looked at some of AOC's speeches, I would find what you're talking about. And in fact, I may just try and do that just to show you that, she does say the right things often, but she doesn't have any power. So she's got to be very careful with what she does. But I think her heart's in the right place. And I'm going to look for those kind of.
Well, I look forward to seeing those. I hope that you can find some, and I will be very happy to concede error before when you do. Or if I find something, I'll continue to look. All right, before we go, I mentioned Kshama Sawant. She is the thumbnail. The question is, can Kshama defeat the Republicrats? Can we defeat the Republicrats? I absolutely believe we have to defeat them, and the only way to do it is with alternative candidates, with emerging party or independent candidates. That's the only way they're going to ever change. The Democrats will never change unless they're voted out of office repeatedly, and then maybe they'll change. And by then, who cares if they change? Because we won't. They'll be out of office. I want to play just a little bit. This is Kshama Sawant, and again, this is the plain spoken, speaking truth to power that I think Americans are just so hungry for, Arlen, that we're just dying for. Here she is.
No politician who has supported this genocide deserves one more working class vote. Every single one of them deserves to be thrown out of office, starting with Adam Smith. Smith has never met a war that he didn't like. He has fully backed the genocide in Gaza. He has demonized anti-genocide activists as extremists and left-wing fascists, called for them to be arrested, and likened their actions to the far-right attack on the U.S. Capitol. He holds the shameful distinction of being one of only 5 sitting Democratic Congress members who voted for the Iraq War in 2002. He supported the wars in Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and the current bloody inter-imperialist proxy war in Ukraine. For nearly 3 decades, Smith has been bankrolled by weapons industry profiteers such as Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Palantir, General Atomics, and Kymeta. In 2016, he was one of only 16 Democrats who voted against an amendment to block the transfer of cluster bombs, which are horrific weapons used for mass indiscriminate killing, to Saudi Arabia for use against the people of Yemen, something for which he has been handsomely rewarded by Textron, the leading manufacturer of cluster bombs. In 2021, as chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Smith proudly championed a grotesque $768 billion budget for the Pentagon, making it the largest military budget in U.S. history at the time, and $25 billion over even what President Biden was calling for. Far from being a foot soldier, Smith is a general among the war hawks.
All right, I'm going to stop it there, Arlen. Now, I'm not necessarily asking you to agree with everything she said. I know you support more, or you have supported in the past the Ukraine war, as has Smith. But I just want you to comment on the way she's presenting that. Do you feel like that's I do, but maybe you don't think that's an effective way for her to present her case to be in Congress?
Well, I think her points are good. I like what she says, but right away I can see problems in that. Look at her name, look at her background, look at her accent. She doesn't quite fit in with the kind of person that's going to get a lot of votes. So, I wish her well. I don't really know her, but...
well, she's running as an independent. She's not running the Democratic primary. She doesn't have to convince Democratic primary voters. She'll be running the general election. I would note that Kshama Sawant is a serious candidate. She is not like a Hal Ginsburg. She was 10 years a Seattle City Council member. This is a Seattle district, so she's well known to the voters of that district, and she survived a recount effort. She got some pretty important referenda or pretty important citizens initiatives passed, including what they call the Amazon tax, which puts an added tax on very large companies that do business in the city. And she championed that. She pushed it through over the objections of the Democrats, who are the vast majority on the council. But she was able to generate enough pressure on them that they had to vote along with her. So this is a successful Seattle politician who has won several elections already.
Yeah, I have no problem with her and what she says. And I would certainly be happy with an independent who has views like her. I mean, look at Bernie Sanders. He's an independent. He's not a Democrat. She's just, what's important, I think, is what they say and what they'll vote for and who they'll support and who will support them. I'll keep looking at her, and she does sound promising.
So that's interesting, Arlen, because what we heard from Kshama there is far more, there's a lot of, you can tell she's angry. She's not in a good mood. She's pissed off, like I think so many of us are. But she also isn't speaking in platitudes. There's no generalizations. There's no you need a representative who's going to support the working class. She's real specific. He's voting for war. He's voting to spend your tax money on genocide. Don't vote for him. That is the kind of, very specific, but at the same time, I think emotional appeal that Democrats need to emulate and won't.
Yeah, I'd like to see some Democrats primaried. I'd like to see some of the older ones that are stuck in their ways to be replaced by people who have, new ideas and more progressive thoughts. So, I'm hoping that will happen. And I think the Democrats are going to be fighting about that. Do we want to get rid of the incumbents, or do we want to, keep them and all that? That's, I think, an issue that Democrats will fight about. But like you, I'm happy if she's an independent and progressive and, believes what she believes. So all the more power to her.
Well, in California, you're going to have a chance to vote for Butch Ware for governor. He is a Green. He'll be running on the Green ticket in 2 years. What is it, next year, right? When is Newsom's up in 26 or 28?
26. 26.
Yeah, so it's next year. By the way, there's some talk that before we let you go, you always got a last word, but I want to just have a little dialogue for you about California politics. I'm not there anymore. There's chatter. I don't know if you've heard any more than I have. Maybe you have. I hope you have. That Kamala Harris may decide to run for governor. Have you heard anything about that?
Oh, absolutely. People are looking at her and thinking, well, what would she, and they know that if she did decide to run, she would probably, be a heavy favorite. But I think there's also the issue of she might actually be thinking about running for president. And if she's, the governor of California, she can't run for president very easily. So, there's just, you have to consider that.
Well, Bobby Kennedy, did he not run in 68 for president when he was, I believe, governor of the state at that time? So it's been done. But you're right. It would seem a little odd to be governor and then just elected 2 years earlier and then running again for president. Where do you come down on that? Do you support Harris for governor or for president? A, and B, who else are you aware of who's considering a run in 26 for governor?
Yeah, I'm not too sure about Kamala Harris just because the way she campaigned for president, I think, is not totally 100% her. She was advised to talk about these things, and she was very cautious about continuing to support Joe Biden. So, I can't be sure exactly where she stands on everything, but I mean, she, as far as I know, she seems like a good choice. I would consider, at least looking at her very carefully.
By the way, I want to just correct myself. I got it completely wrong. Bobby Kennedy was not a Californian. He was the senator from the state of New York when he was assassinated while he was campaigning in California for the Democratic nomination. A nomination he probably would have won, I believe.
Yeah.
And had he won, he might well have defeated Nixon. It would have been a different race for sure. So very unfortunate. But I got it completely wrong. I don't know why I thought he was governor of California. I don't know where I got that from, but obviously Reagan was governor of California. I think Reagan may have been governor at that time, actually. All right, Arlen. So you're not, Did you say anyone else besides that you had heard was running besides maybe Kamala? Who it's not definite, by the way, that she's running.
Well, I like Katie. What's her name? Katie Perry or
Katie
whatever.
Porter. Katie Porter.
Katie Porter. She's I like her, but as far as president, I think it's a little too early to figure out who would be good. I gotta believe there's Democrats all over the country that would be better than the ones that have been talked about. We seem to have a lot of good governors, so eventually somebody will come out in front, and we'll just have to wait and see who it is.
Well, according to Politico, let's continue this conversation for a moment longer. According to Politico, I believe the latest poll of likely Democrats among Democratic voters has Mayor Pete slightly ahead of AOC as the choice of more Democratic primary voters. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, just that it's really too early to start looking at those kind of things. We're talking about 2028. It's a long way away. And, obviously Buttigieg will have problems. AOC will have problems. So, again, it's just too early to look at these polls.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, though. I wish that we had a front runner. I mean, after all, in 20 2017, I think the general consensus was Bernie would be the front runner to be the Democratic nominee in 2020. He had lost to Hillary, but in a very close race. And although certainly the establishment hated Bernie, certainly there was anybody but Bernie sentiment among the Democratic leaders. I think most voters believed, and even the media would have said, yeah, Bernie's the odds-on favorite for 2020 Democratic candidate for president. And that would have been correct. He was the odds-on favorite. It took, again, the concerted efforts of the party to defeat him. And they were wrong to defeat him, because it would have been much better if he had been the nominee. He would have beaten Trump, and he would have been a better president than Biden. But all that said, the party had kind of come together, not elites, but the voters, the rank and file, were like, yeah, Bernie. Well, I think it's unfortunate we don't have that right now.
You got to think of something else, too. If Bernie was running, can you imagine what Fox News, Newsmax, all those right-wingers will be, attacking him? They'll call him a communist, all kinds of terrible things. So it wouldn't have been easy for him. He's a little too progressive for the average American, I think, and I'd like to see him.
Well, on economic issues, he's far to the left, but not necessarily on social issues, not on guns, for example. He's gotten a lot of criticism from some in the Democratic Party for being too pro, for having gotten the support of the NRA in at least one election. And he did a Fox town hall that got a lot of popular response when he was in West Virginia.
I'd love to see him run for president, but being in the 80s, I don't think that's...
No, I'm not saying he should run now. I'm saying, I agree, he can't run now. What I'm saying is that after Trump won in 2016, there was a sense, I think, almost immediately, that Bernie was the likely nominee in 2020. Now, maybe not, and he was old then too, obviously not as old as he is now. But there was like a recognition that this was a guy who had a lot of popularity, who was popular both inside and outside the party, and could win. But we don't have anyone like that today. There's no one like that in the Democratic Party.
You were absolutely right a few minutes ago when you said the establishment doesn't like Bernie, and that's why he lost. And yeah, unless you could crack the establishment, get some rich people supporting you, it's going to be a real rough road.
Yeah, I mean, but what I'm saying is anybody that the establishment would support, like a Mayor Pete or an Amy Klobuchar, the rank and file aren't going to like. They're not going to be able to command a lot of support, just like Kamala couldn't.
Well, we're a very divided country right now, Hal, and nobody has answers that everybody's going to believe in. So, we're just going to have to watch all the damage that keeps coming on, and hopefully somebody with a positive message will come forward, and we'll have somebody to support in 2028. But at this moment, I don't know who that would be.
All right, before we let you get your last word, Arlen, one more question. We talked about the Democratic Party. Is there doubt in your mind that J.D. Vance will be the Republican nominee?
He certainly would be the one. 28? Yeah, 2028. Well, he'd be the most likely one. I don't think he's that popular right now, but we don't. It's really too early to think of something like that. And will Trump even step down? That's not 100% sure.
I think it's fair to ask. I don't think that's an unfair question. I think most people, including myself, assume he will not try to stay in power. I certainly hope that. I think that's probably the case. I would say that they're like the Democrats. There's no national Republican popular figure. There's no Republican besides Trump who commands support throughout the country.
Yeah, you're right. But I know somebody else that wants to be president too, and that's Donald Trump Jr. So, it could continue in the Trump family, which would be horrible.
Yeah, but we don't like that. I mean, Americans didn't want, Jeb to be president. They didn't want yet another Bush in office after the two Georges. They didn't want Hillary after, I think, there was Clinton fatigue, there was Bush fatigue. I think there's likely to be Trump fatigue as well.
Well, there probably will be, but at the same time, nobody thought even Trump would be president. I mean, he was on the ropes a lot of times in the last few years, but yet, unlike anybody else, he finds a way to stay alive and keep going and get what he wants. And so far, that's what he's getting.
He got a very, very favorable draw, Arlen. His first, he was going up against a demented president, and there was a concerted cover-up to prevent the American people from knowing and seeing what we were all seeing. And then, the person he ran against was anointed. She wasn't chosen by primary voters. She wasn't popular in primary elections in 2020. She wasn't a good candidate. I don't look at Trump as some kind of master politician. I think he's someone who a couple times got lucky.
He got very lucky. He continues to be lucky. He has something about him. I don't know if it's charisma or just super high confidence in himself, but it resonates with people who are frustrated with their lives right now. And there's no way in the world that he deserves to be in the top office in this country, but unfortunately he is.
All right, before we let you go, Arlen, before we call it a day, final word, anything else beyond what you've already discussed or that I didn't give you enough time to expound upon?
No, I got to say what I wanted to say, Hal, and we both know that this is a bad time for America and for the world. And, all we can do is hope for better times ahead and people who will really work and fight for those better times.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, that seems like A, what you just said, common sense, but B, uncommonly seen, right? We don't get the common sense we know is the way things ought to be. All right, that's gonna do it. Arlen and me, I'll be back tomorrow. He'll be back a week from today. Have a great afternoon.
Very good. Thanks, Hal.